Tonight, we discuss the Salem witch trials. I hope you don't have any moles or a speech impediment, and that you can hold your breath for a long time. On Newsworthy, 2 words and 2 question marks.
He's alive! Have you checked the children? Get out!
You have scoured the podcast world and finally found us, Newsworthy with Steve and Jerry, where we delve into all things mysterious, macabre, or out of this world, and decide if they are truly newsworthy. 2 words and 2 question marks.
Why should you work with Ed Locke? A better question is, why wouldn't you work with him? He is proud to support an amazing lender, USA Mortgage.
When you work with them, you can expect a home financing experience that is free of hassles and headaches. They have complete control over your loan due to in-house operations such as processing, underwriting, closing, and funding.
USA Mortgage represents a lot of fantastic things, but they are especially thrilled to partner in several community outreach programs, including Habitat for Humanity, Home Sweet Home, Veterans Community Project, and many, many more. They love going to work every day, which means they love working for you. Ed wants to be your lender for life, so reach out to him today and get the journey started.
If you would like more information, please reach out to Ed Locke at area code 502-680-0953, NMLS 448908, USA Mortgage NMLS 227262. USA Mortgage is an equal housing lender. This is not a commitment to lend. Additional terms and conditions may apply. For licensing information, go to www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org.
Hello, Jerry.
Hello, Steve.
Guess what we did?
What did we do?
We got Brett his own microphone this week.
That we did.
How about that, Brett?
Joining the big leagues.
Yeah.
In person.
And I'm going to go ahead and double his salary.
That's right.
Why stop there? Let's triple it.
Triple it?
Why not?
Finally get that
very
Corvette I've
deserving
been
guy.
eyeing. Yeah.
Huh?
Finally get that Corvette I've been eyeing.
Well, I
don't know about all that.
It has Matchbox written on the top. It might work. That might do it. I don't know.
We are willing to give you a large percentage of our net proceeds. Unfortunately, that's still very close to zero. So,
Hey, I'll take it.
You know, here's the thing.
what's that?
And you're talking about money, and we have an amazing sponsor, USA
we do.
Mortgage.
I'm very thankful for him.
Very, very thankful. But I've listened to hundreds of podcasts.
Okay.
And what I don't understand is, so me and you've always joked that if we get a HelloFresh commercial, we know we've made it, right? Because they're on everything. A HelloFresh or like a slots machine app
Right.
ad. They're
Another
on
one
everything.
that I think is funny is the Manscaped.
Yes. If we could shave our nether regions and talk about it and get, those ads, we know we've made it.
Absolutely.
But I've seen episodes or not episodes, but podcasts where they have like 13 total episodes over 3 years and they have these ads.
Well, the majority of those are probably using their podcast sponsor and letting them input whatever ads they want.
Oh, yeah.
Is
That's
my
a good
guess.
point.
You still get a percentage of that, though.
You do.
So
But
it's
Are they
like-
celebrities? Like where they're already well known?
I mean, it's
A lot
still
of them
lazy. I used to have a T-shirt back when you and Josh played baseball, Brett, that said, "Talent or hard work will always beat talent when talent refuses to work hard." And we working our asses off. We need some of that. We need some of that revenue. I'm just saying. Just saying. In fact, in doing research for this very episode, I learned something that I didn't know.
what was that?
I learned who actually built the round table for King Arthur.
Oh, man.
I don't know that.
Yeah. His name was Circumference.
Circumference. Hey, at least he was knighted, right? He had been knighted. Mr. Circumference became Circumference.
What an unfortunate name.
Yeah. That was bad.
That was a perfect dad joke. How was y'all's week?
It's good.
Week was good. Week was real good.
Glad yours was. Mine wasn't so much.
Why?
I lost my job as a masseuse.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
$12?
Apparently, I've rubbed some people the wrong way.
Oh my god. I almost used that one today. I almost used it. I'm glad I didn't pick that one.
I'm glad you did too, because I would have been without a dad joke.
Oh man.
Kudos. Finally, I don't have to say the words, Jerry.
That was not one of the better ones, but I'm glad you liked it.
You know, before the podcast, we were discussing, how AI and spell check have basically negatively affected our ability to spell. So it got me to thinking, how do you spell butt cheeks? Is it one word, or do you spread them apart?
That's not exactly how I heard that.
Well,
I heard it. Is it one word, or do you spread that apart?
Well,
this is kid friendly.
Exactly.
Definitely you spread that apart. I'm just saying. Hey, real quick before we get into the podcast in earnest, we got a cool topic tonight too, by the way, recommended by Sir Brett. We're going to be talking about.
Who's also knighted?
Are you?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna say no.
She calls him sir.
Whoo!
I'm pretty sure I've heard Truly say that.
You can take them to school. You can buy them the books, but they don't necessarily have to learn. I'm just saying.
Oh my God.
Listen, I wanted to talk about just for a second. My cousin, I saw him over the weekend. He has one very successful podcast and just started a new one. I wanted to bring that up on the ad. We're going to link to it at the end of this episode. It's the 12-ounce Curl Route podcast. All about football, all about sports. Awesome. Check that out. It's available on Spotify. It's available anywhere. I wanted to make sure that Aaron got a proper shout.
What's the name of it again?
It's the 12-ounce Curl Route.
12-ounce Curl.
Yeah, podcast.
You almost called it Root. Why?
Because I haven't played football in 30 years. That's why.
That's a northern word, root. It's not route, it's root.
Oh, okay.
When I first moved to Fredericksburg, I remember, found that out real quick. Oh. Route 1 and Route 3 are the two main roads in the town, and calling it route. And people are like, where are you from?
Well, definitely check that out. Spotify, the 12-ounce Curl Route podcast.
From a good guy, Mr. Aaron.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a Bears fan. Don't knock him for that.
You were a Bears fan for many years.
Yeah, he kind of learned that from me back in the day because he's a lot younger than me. And then, but he knows he is a Bears fan. He knows NFL scouts. He's very knowledgeable. He's taken it to a new level.
That's awesome.
And I'm very proud of what he's been able to accomplish in his career and what he does on the side. And that's just fantastic stuff. So
I don't know him personally, but he is in our fantasy football league. Yeah. And he's always one of the top couple guys.
Absolutely.
He knows he's very good at it.
Absolutely.
Always dread playing him, and I'm playing him this week.
Well, you always dread playing me, too, because I'm massive.
Have I ever lost you?
Yeah.
Like ever?
Yeah.
Like ever?
Like all the time. I have more championships than you.
No, we're tied.
No.
2 apiece.
I have more than you.
According to who? A legend in your own mind.
It's what they say.
That's what they say.
Not if they know what they're talking about.
So, Brett, this was your topic. This is what you wanted to talk about. It's November 1st today.
That it is.
And you wanted to talk about the Salem witch trials.
Right, yeah. I thought it'd be interesting because I've heard about it and I've seen it in movies, but after researching it, I realized how little I knew about it.
So, just let me ask you a question before we start. We, a couple of weeks ago, did voodoo, and we were stoked about how exciting voodoo was going to be. And we very rapidly realized that it was a no-fly zone. It was terrible. You got more for us than that?
I honestly think we could break this topic into multiple episodes.
Okay, cool.
I think there's a lot to it that you can dive into.
Let's do it. Let's dive headlong.
All right. Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started.
How was that for
do it.
Kentucky slang?
Do it.
Headlong.
Yeah, so the Salem witch trials, they took place between February of 1692 to May of 1693, so a little over a year. Over 200 people were accused throughout that time. 30 people were found guilty. 19 people were executed by hanging. 14 of those were women, 5 were men. One man was killed during torture, and then at least 5 people died while in jail. So the Salem witch trials remains the deadliest witch hunt in the history of North America. So it's been a big deal, and as you'll find out, it's impacted a lot of the things that we have come to take for granted here in America. So just some background. New England had been settled by religious dissenters, mainly Puritans, seeking to escape from the Catholic and Anglican Church to build a more Bible-based society. The Puritans that settled around Salem believed in predestination. So while everyone was required to go to church, to be a member, you had to give testimony as to how you were chosen by God.
So wait a minute. Just let me get this clear for my head. They moved here for religious freedom.
Right.
To shut down their religion.
Yes.
Kind of defeats the point to me.
Did you catch the part about predestination?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what that means?
Yes.
They believe you were predestined for heaven or hell.
Right.
And there was nothing you could do to change it.
And so that's why they made it everybody had to go to church, but they made it a caveat. To be a member, you had to prove that you were one of the chosen, that you were destined for heaven.
I just found
and that'll
that
come into
remarkable.
play later. Yeah.
I just, hey, we're going to a whole new world to start a new, to be religiously free, and you get here and you completely close off your religion. Anyway, sorry.
So, just some more background. In 1689, the governor of the Dominion of New England, which was Sir Edmund Andros at the time, was ousted after a revolution took place in England that replaced the current Catholic King James II with his Protestant daughter, Queen Mary II. So this left an interim governor to govern the area. However, he lacked the constitutional authority since the old charter had been vacated, and the new governor that they had implemented had not yet arrived. So this led to a new charter that included a commission of special court of oyer and terminer, which basically translates to hear and determine. So basically this gave the local counties to kind of govern themselves. So in 1672, Salem had voted to hire their own minister due to disputes over property lines to surrounding counties and also disputes over church privileges. So they went through three ministers who all were unordained from 1673 to 1688 until hiring their first ordained minister, Samuel Parris, in 1689, paying him £66 annually.
So I have a question, and this is, and I'm not making jokes. So the Salem witch trials are all based out of one small community, one church community?
Not one church, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's just that
one town,
one area.
Oh,
yeah,
just
the
one
village
town.
of
Okay.
Salem.
Okay, I'm just curious. Sorry to interrupt.
it wasn't the only witch trials. It was the largest and by far
Right,
most
right,
famous.
just in that area. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they eventually voted to raise his benefits. This is Samuel Parris, 4 months after being a minister, to include him being deeded the parsonage along with 2 acres. This, however, conflicted with the 1681 village resolution, which made it unlawful to convey the houses or lands belonging to the ministry for any cost. So basically, they had promised him this house and this land, but according to their village laws, it was considered unlawful, which caused a lot of
Further problems.
right, yeah, a lot of disagreements within the town. So, yeah, he led to increased division within the village due to his radical beliefs. So he was very radical in the way that he governed the church. So he would make church members suffer public penance for very small infractions. He would just try and seek out bad behavior to make examples of people. So he was a very polarizing figure in the town. So it's also important to note, just as a little bit more background before we get into the witch trials themselves, a book had recently been written by a guy named Joseph Glanville, and was published called Against Modern Sadduceeism. And in the book, Glanville made the claim that those who denied the supernatural, demons, spirits, etc., were heretics. And this book was believed to be in the library of this Samuel Parris. And again, I don't know if I said this, but this book was written in 1668, so right before these events occurred. It's also important to note that the witchcraft have been publicized recently by a minister of a church in Boston, so very close to Salem, where he published pamphlets describing observations made of supposed witch activity in Boston, which included neck, back pain, tongues drawn from the throat, loud random outcries, no control over bodies, acting like animals, and trying to harm themselves or others. And these events, or these symptoms, kind of led to the start of the witch trials in 1692.
So, how long after the main swath of smallpox did this happen? This is like right after, I think smallpox was what, 1689, maybe?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
So weird. Sorry, it just sounds
if that's
like
the case, it would be really close.
It just sounds like there's a whole lot of weird crap going on from their perspective now.
And I guess some more background building on that is, they were in a new area. They had kind of gone off to have their, religious freedom. And because of that, they had, the threats of Native Americans, coming in, and they had, they were very poor. So, they were scared of dying disease. And
it sounds like this pastor, this preacher had a lot of power.
Most pastors at that day and time did.
And that's crazy, because what's the old saying? Absolute power corrupts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this looks like where we're going with this.
Even, you know what it reminded me of when he was reading it?
What?
Part of the, oh crap, what is that HBO series? Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Remember in there when the religious people took over?
Yeah, oh yeah.
What this was reminded me
Yeah,
of.
no, that's a great
analogy.
Yeah,
It's exactly what that reminded me of.
Shame.
Yeah, shame.
One of my favorite parts of the show, by the way. Lead Henley is just, sorry.
Where she walks
Yeah.
down the...
Yeah. Sorry.
I can see why it's your favorite part.
Maybe I could. Jerry's going to cover part of this, and maybe that's where I missed out on.
Jerry's going to cover what?
Part
of what?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're going to uncover parts of things.
What is it you're referring to? I'm not for sure. Go ahead. Please explain.
Anyway, back to you, Brett.
All right, so this one more background piece before we kind of get into it. So witch trials and executions that occurred in a lot of Europe and in the New England area since the earliest recording execution, which was in 1647 in Hartford, Connecticut. So witch trials had been kind of a thing in that area and in Europe. So this wasn't the first witch trial, but it's very significant because of all the people who were executed because of it.
Why do you think that this one garnered? I mean, there's some pretty good group of or cast of characters here. But why do you think Salem takes the brunt of that? Like Jerry had said earlier, Connecticut had witch trials, New Hampshire, all of these places where freedoms were being, religious freedom, and I am using air quotes, is being displayed. They always have to pick on a victim to say that's the baddie.
Right.
So why do you think the Salem ones?
I think it was their freedom to govern themselves.
Gotcha.
And
Lord of the Flies type.
As you'll kind of see with the progression of how these events unfolded, you'll kind of see it just got completely out of control. And they didn't really gain control of the situation until an outside governing power came in and kind of took over.
Well, far be it for me to stop you. Keep going.
Yeah, so February of 1692, a girl named Betty Parris, which was the daughter of Samuel Parris, the minister at the time, she was 9, and her cousin Abigail Williams, which was 11, and was the niece of Reverend Parris. began to have fits such as screaming and throwing things, making strange sounds, crawling under furniture, contorting themselves into peculiar positions, and the girls would complain of being pinched and pricked, but a doctor would come in, found no evidence of physical ailment, and then they would also interrupt church services with loud outbursts. So one thing that I noticed in this research was they had cited a bunch of different sources of people who, other ministers and doctors who had come in to evaluate the girls, and almost all of them seemed to think it was unexplainable. It was some sort of supernatural power, some sort of bewitching that had occurred.
At 1692, we're still using leeches.
Right. It's not like the medical field was super advanced then.
Yeah, we're going to bleed you out if you get a blood disease.
Yeah. And did you not say that the one girl lived with one of the doctors?
No, I did not see that.
Okay.
But
Elizabeth Hubbard, I think, she had become an orphan when she was young, and she lived with her uncle who'd taken her in, who was one of the doctors at the time, which could certainly, she was one of the original accusers.
Right.
She was one of them that began having some of these issues.
Yeah, so these original two, which was the daughter and niece of the minister at the time, they had initially accused this slave from Barbados, which was owned by Samuel Parris. Her name was Tituba, and she was initially accused by Parris and Williams to harming them, but was not charged since they were not of the age to testify in court. But it said that Parris severely beat Tituba after this, and so that kind of leads into the next set of names who started having similar symptoms was Ann Putnam Jr., who was 12, and then Elizabeth Hubbard, who you just mentioned, who was 17. They started having similar symptoms and accused 3 women of bewitching all 4 of the girls. So these were the first to name multiple women bewitching them. So all were considered to be social outcasts and exhibited character traits typical of a witch at the time. So the first one I was going to talk about, her name was Sarah Good. So she was very poor at the time. Her father was very wealthy, but she did not inherit any money. So she ended up marrying one of the indentured servants that her father owned after he had worked his amount of time that he owed. And those that accused her thought that she had just been jealous, which is why she would have bewitched the kids. Her husband actually also ended up testifying against her, saying that she was a witch. The second was a girl named Sarah Osborne. She was neighbors with the Putnams, who was one of the girls who was accused. Her first husband died in 1674, and she ended up marrying one of the indentured servants, again, another indentured servant, who had been freed. She rarely attended church meetings and defied her husband's will, which left all of the land to their 2 sons, and instead she took over the property herself. So Ann Putnam, her father, was actually involved in the legal proceedings following that, due to him being the executor of her husband's will. And then the last one, as I already mentioned, was Tituba, who was a slave from Barbados. It's theorized that she had maybe told the girls stories of, I'm going to say this, knowing that we just talked about this, voodoo and witchcraft. So I'm not sure how much of it was actual voodoo, but after listening to the last podcast. But
according from our episode, none of it.
And then she also confessed to making a witch cake for Elizabeth Parris, which comes to find out a neighbor actually asked her to make the witch cake for them while Reverend Parris and his wife were out on they were out of town. And then she also confessed to speaking with the devil, stating that she was ordered by the devil to worship him and hurt the children in the village. And she later confessed to learning about occult techniques from her mistress back in Barbados.
I want to interject one thing, and I'm just going to say this.
Yeah.
There was an extreme amount of pressure brought to many of these people to get them to admit to their crimes.
100%.
And to the point that some people were killed during the torture, whether it was placing huge rocks on them until they admitted it. There was extreme waterboarding going on. Furthermore, if they did admit to the crime of being a witch, what was their punishment? They were reintegrated into society.
Right.
But if you denied it and were found guilty, what was the punishment?
Yeah, there's death.
Death.
Yeah. So it was, yeah.
Whole lot of reason to admit
really
to
any
crap that might
options.
not have been true, even if it wasn't true.
No, that's a good
Just
point.
going to say that.
Well, as someone who has had very close ties with people with mental illness, it sounds like a lot of the
No.
issues that the women were enduring, that
Who? The accused?
Yeah.
Or the accusers?
the accused that they were going through was, what do you mean?
It just wasn't. The evidence doesn't point to that.
The evidence doesn't point to them having a mental illness?
Most of them, not before that they were accused and began to be traumatized and tortured. No. Probably some mental illness after they got through with the criminal process.
But he just said they were originally, it was even brought up originally because of screams and
No, I'm not
making
saying-
noises.
You're talking about the girls.
That's
Yeah.
the victims.
The accusers.
That's what I'm
the
talking
victims.
about.
There were victims who were suddenly
Ramona.
beginning to have fits and claim that they knew who had cast spells on them.
Right.
Right.
A lot of it sounds more like voodoo than it does witchcraft when it comes to casting spells and all that.
It sounds like mental illness.
Could be.
I mean,
But if it was really
But it
mental
affected-
illness, why were they believed in court and people sentenced to death as a result of their testimony?
because no one had a clue what mental illness was in 1692.
Well, they knew what crazy was.
Well,
No,
and what's
I don't believe that
There was
at all.
crazy people since the beginning of time.
right?
They've known what crazy people were for a long time.
But if you are a person who suffers from bipolarism, as an example,
I'm not saying they understood the intricacies of a lot of it.
that's what I'm getting at.
Schizophrenia,
If I'm suffering from that and I have no idea what that is, and Joni over there took my man, why not blame it on her?
there's more to it than that. Well,
I'm not
maybe.
saying that there's
but
not.
here's the point. Some of these women, one of the tests that was used was one of the accused women, if she happened to go into fits, seizures at the trial.
Grandma seizure, what would that look like?
They would bring the accused person over and force the accused person to touch the person having the fits. If they stopped immediately, that was a proof that the accused was a witch.
Right. It was
The
not
evil
random.
spirits. Now, that's not mental illness. This
No, that's
person
a
who's lying there
physical
having a
ailment.
fit. Wait a minute. You just said that it sounded like a lot of it was mental illness.
If a person,
the person
is
was lying
having
there
a
having,
fit,
and that was mental illness, they're not going to
No,
stop because
you-
someone touched them.
he never lets me
Well,
finish.
well, one thing that I think points to it not being some sort of mental, it happened to 4 girls at around the same time,
It happened to way more than 4.
and they seemed to be in a normal condition
I'm just-
beforehand.
I'm just saying. First of all, seizures can come onto a human being at any time during their life.
Sure.
If a person in 1692 had a grand mal seizure during this, that looks very much like a fit.
But you
It
wouldn't
could.
expect it to happen to multiple girls.
No,
at
I'm
the
not
same
saying
time.
that. But unless there was an environmental issue, where's the place where all the rich people go? Out on Hilton Head.
Okay.
No, not
You're talking
Hilton
about up
Head.
north.
Camp, the what is that place?
What's a little island? It's not.
Obama just had his butler or his cook die there. What was it? What was the name of that place? These dogs.
Come to me in a minute. I don't
But
know.
anyway,
It's up north.
that place up there has long had a history of people who live on the island to go blind because of some sort of environmental thing. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm saying in 1692, those types of mental and or physical ailments, a doctor would have who basically can give you some alcohol and make you feel better.
Yeah. Well, I think Jerry. I don't know if you saw anything in your research, but one thing that it seemed every source that I was looking at, despite whatever their opinion was of the witch trials, they had no explanation as to why the girls were acting in these fits. You know, some believe it might have been faked. You know, Some don't really know for sure. Some think it might have been some sort of other disease that they just hadn't discovered yet. That might have been contagious. Not necessarily a mental disease, but so anyways, so this was all in that first month. So in March, others began to be accused of witchcraft. 2 of the women who were accused were full members of the church, which is kind of why I talked about that at the beginning. So those women who were members of the church, the fact that they were members led people of Salem to consider that anyone could be a witch. So it really caused a lot of fear in the village. And both of those women had expressed skepticism of the credibility of the girls' accusations. So they had spoken out against, the things that were occurring, and almost right after that, they were accused of being a witch. So the youngest of the accused throughout this whole process was a girl named Dorothy Good, who was the daughter of Sarah Good, who was also accused of being a witch.
And how old was Dorothy?
She was 4 years old. So
4 years old and accused of being a witch.
I have an almost 4-year-old. She'll be 4 next week. And just knowing that, it's kind of crazy to think that they could accuse a 4-year-old girl of doing something.
Is that all that they did? Did they just accuse her, or was she punished? Surely they didn't punish a 4-year-old.
Yeah, she was put in jail.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For how long?
To that I'm not sure. I'm at least a year until the trials were
And
finished.
if I remember correctly, her mom was in jail with her. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And her mom was pregnant when she went, and her
Right.
Dorothy, 4-year-old child, watched her mother give birth,
Yep.
watch her sister die.
Yep.
And when Dorothy was finally released at the age of 5, she was declared mentally insane.
Yeah. No kidding.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be insane after being imprisoned at the age of 4 for being a witch?
Right.
By the way, she also admitted to several things. Like a 4-year-old has a capability to withstand pressure after being tortured and saying, did you have a snake? Didn't you have a snake that bit you? Yeah, she testified in court that she had a snake that bit her and sucked blood from her.
Yeah.
A 4-year-old.
Right. It just keeps getting more out of hand after this. So do you want to talk about some of the examinations that they were doing?
Sure. Not really. I will. I hate to. It's depressing.
Right.
It's absolutely sad and disgusting. Go ahead.
I would like to know, as even in 69, I've argued several times already about how these people just didn't know, right? They didn't know if there was a mental issue. They didn't know if there was a physical or an environmental thing.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like you said, a lot of the things we're talking about had never even been discussed at that time.
Exactly. So I've been kind of defending them on that point. Yeah. But when you start talking about a 4-year-old who's barely putting together cohesive sentences.
Right.
And maybe not even doing a good job of that.
And that's our 4-year-olds today that can do all this amazing stuff.
That have grown up watching TV.
Right.
And tons of resources they didn't have back then.
Yeah.
So how would you, as a human male, because this is predominantly males, look at a 4-year-old kid and be like, "Oh, that's a witch." Am I wrong to think that witchcraft involves spells and spell casting and?
No, I don't think you're wrong.
So how would they even? I'm like you. It makes me very sad and very angry that they could look at a 4-year-old and say, "Oh, that's a witch."
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
What'd you start to say? I thought you
I was just saying, because you were talking about, most of the accusers were women.
Wow.
So, I mean, the people, conducting the trials were men, but a lot of the accusers were women.
I had always figured it was men.
Yeah.
I'd never heard, but I always figured it was men.
Yeah.
We'll go into it. One of the tests, I'll just lead off of that.
Yeah,
it's not
tell us about the test.
Most people have heard the phrase, the saying, cold as a witch's tit. That was one of the tests used.
How
they
so?
would disrobe a woman to the waist. They would examine her breast. Let me find it here in my list. Goose has decided to join the party.
For those that don't know, Goose is my one-eyed broken cat.
If you've ever heard the expression, cold as a witch's tit, now you know the origins. It corresponds to any type of mole or unusual skin blemish from which all witches, and frankly, most people, are characterized to have. Meaning, the test was that the tit would be pricked with a needle, and if the recipient didn't bleed or feel it, then surely there was a witch in our midst. Oftentimes, the needles would be purposely blunted so as to not cause the woman to bleed, which would obviously not show how cold or unfeeling that the tit really was. Now, I've long heard this, and I knew that I'd heard that it was used in the trials. I had figured that it was a bunch of perverted old men wanting to use this as an excuse to grope some young women. So I had always figured that the majority of the people doing the accusing was a bunch of perverted old men. No, it turns out that it's a group of young 12 to 20-year-old women.
Jealous, angry.
Usually accusing other women. The vast majority were women.
Angry.
It's hard to argue with that when you begin to look. We talked about that test. Let's go through some of the other tests that were used to determine guilt or innocence.
Let's see how many we can pass, Brett.
Spectral evidence. This type of evidence is based on claims by accusers when they said that they could see the individual accused of witchcraft in dreams doing the devil's work. So in other words, I said, you know what? I had a dream last night that Sarah Jane was doing the devil's work. Sarah Jane's a witch.
So we wouldn't pass that test because we know Jerry dreams of us most nights.
Oh, absolutely. Without fail.
So we're already 0 for 1.
You're screwing it up already. Number 2, eyewitness testimonials. Now, not surprisingly, some witnesses would confess to actually seeing the alleged witches practicing their black magic, which was enough to tattoo guilt all over them. Of course, there was absolutely nothing to stop accusers from making up stories. Now, to be honest, that really hasn't changed from then till now.
No.
That's possibility.
There are laws against using that as proof.
But for one person, if it's just he said, she said.
Yeah, right.
But even today, if you get 3 or 4 people that are going to testify consistently against you, you're probably in trouble.
Yeah.
And I'll give you one example. So Sarah Good, she was the one who was very poor at the time. So she was
not Dorothy's mother, correct? Dorothy's mother was Dorcas, I thought. Maybe I could be wrong.
No, I believe she was Dorothy's mother.
Okay, maybe. Go ahead. It's really irrelevant. Go ahead.
You know, that's one of those commercials, just to intersect for a second. Have you seen those commercials about how not to act like your parents, and putting in impertinent facts is one of those things? Sorry.
You may be right on that. I'm not entirely sure. But so she was seen leaving the Paris's house, so the Reverend's house, after, which she said she was just going to, ask for money, which she said the Parises gave her money, and she was muttering, she was saying thank you, and she left. Well, a lot of people saw her leave. They were saying she was muttering some sort of witchcraft, some sort of spell as she was leaving, and they used that against her in the trial. But anyways, go ahead.
Another test. Now, we're really going to be in trouble here. They had a test called the Lord's Prayer test. It was a literal test of faith. The accused would be made to recite the Lord's Prayer without error. This included stumbling, stammering, or outright going into fits or spasms. Now, for those of you that have listened to our podcast even just a few minutes, you know that we can't go more than a few sentences without stammering, screwing up something.
You just did.
We would have about 3 times. 3 times in one sentence I did.
Yeah, can you say Catholicism for me, please?
Catholicism? I don't know that I've ever had a problem with that word until last week.
How about the word specific? That's definitely part of their test.
Specific?
Yeah.
There's a lot of words. But can you imagine if you stumbled, if you stammered during reciting the Lord's Prayer?
Being already nervous, like being in front of this whole trial, accused of a witch.
Not only being on trial, knowing if you're found guilty, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Touch test. This one's all about their performance. If an afflicted, this is going back to what you're talking about. If an afflicted person, a person that was saying that they had had a spell cast on them, is in the middle of throwing a fit, and they suddenly become calm after the accused person places their hand on them, then the toucher is most certainly a witch. That is said to be so because all the venom and assorted evil toxins that had originally afflicted the person has now returned to their evil host. So again, there was a lot of people at the time who thought some of these girls at least were putting on a show. And suddenly when this person that they'd accused of being a witch touched them, they would stop.
Yeah.
Pretty good way to prove someone guilty. And you might have suspicions. You might wonder, but how can you prove that they're faking this? Another one, forced confession by dunking. Those who didn't admit to being a witch or under heavy suspicion were usually induced to confess by way of torture. One method was dunking, in which the accused would be held underwater repeatedly until they were successfully broken down. Yeah, I screwed that one up too. I'm definitely a witch. What does that remind you of?
Monty Python.
No, forced confession by dunking into water. Is that not waterboard torture?
Yeah.
We're doing it during the Gulf War. Apparently it was alive and well back during the Salem witch trials. Here's another one, my favorite. This one, how could you dispute this one? It's called bound submersion. The alleged would simply be bound at their hands and feet. Heavy rocks would be attached to them, and they would be thrown into a body of water. If the body floated to the surface, that was proof that they were a witch. On the other hand, if that didn't happen and they sunk and drowned, that was proof they were innocent. So sorry we had to kill you to prove it, but
at least you're innocent. Yeah. No, and if anybody's ever swam with a weight without their hands and feet being bound, it's very difficult.
This is literally, and every one of these came from let me scroll back up, listverse.com. I'll post a link to it. The title of their article was 10 Tests for Guilt Used at the Salem Witch Trials. This is the way that we were proving whether or not someone was a witch. So you guys tell me, this is the way that we got evidence and proved innocence or guilt. Was it fair?
Well, I mean, we do waterboard. They say they don't, but we do.
Depended on how good looking the woman was whose tits they wanted to see if it was cold or not.
I guess. I guess.
Yeah. There's some huge flaws here.
There was another one, I don't think you mentioned, was they would look for unique moles and birthmarks.
On
which just on the body in general,
okay.
which at the time was associated with the devil's influence, representing the devil drinking their blood. Yeah, that was their...
But
so if you got a mole, you're in trouble.
Don't most people have birthmarks?
Yes. Birthmarks, moles?
The investigations were not very good.
Well, again, we're making fun and thinking about how bad this is, and I just play devil's advocate for a second. They didn't really have the best of knowledge.
Right. They didn't have YouTube to be
Did you need the best of knowledge to know that tying rocks to them, and if they floated, you killed them. If they sunk and drowned, sorry. Do you really need to be a genius to figure out this is
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the birthmarks and the moles and stuff. They didn't know that most people had those. And if they did and they had one themselves, damn well they were covering it up. So
until someone accused them and they had to disrobe.
Right.
Yeah. How scary would that be if you were a person, especially a woman living in that time frame, to just not piss somebody off?
Yeah, I know.
Do you know what
Because that's
part
what
of
it
it
comes down
was?
to.
Do you know part of the reason they thought that women were more susceptible to witchcraft than men? Women were less strong, less physically capable of fighting off whatever, which led them to believe they were the weaker sex, not only physically, but mentally as well.
And spiritually. With Adam and Eve, they were, Eve was a little bit easier to give
Women
into
have never
temptation.
been forgiven for that.
Right.
One of these days, I want you to remind me of that because I got a story about Miss Eve.
Okay.
So anyways, I'll continue with the kind of close it all up. So one of the accused husbands objected to the trials. He was arrested. They also began arresting and examining other family members of the accused. Some began confessing and naming additional accomplices. So you kind of see how this just goes out of hand. It's kind of a snowball effect. And when the court of Oyer and Terminer convened at the end of May in 1692. So this was 5 months into this. They had orders to prosecute those who were in jail. So at the time, they had 62 people in custody. This was in May. So the first that was executed, her name was Bridget Bishop. She wore black clothing and costumes, which was against the Puritan code at the time, and she was also accused of bewitching the 5 young women who had shown these symptoms. In the trial testimonies, it was said that the bishop would pinch, choke, or bite these girls. She was also said to dye lace, which was claimed to be too small to be used on anything but a poppet, which is, I guess, what we would consider a voodoo doll. A jury of women also said that she had a third nipple, which was a sure sign of witchcraft, but upon a second inspection, could not be found. So
Wow.
she was executed by hanging on June 10th of 1692.
One of my favorite parts of the movie, what was the movie? Name of the movie? Arnold Schwarzenegger. Where he goes to Mars.
Oh, Schwarzenegger going to Mars? I don't remember that.
Yes.
Total Recall?
Total Recall.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Oh, you have to look at it.
It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but anyway.
If you are listening to the podcast and you remember that part in Total Recall that I'm talking about, send us an email. Just so they know I'm not crazy. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So on July 19th of 1692, Sarah Good, along with 4 others, were found guilty and hanged, and these executions continued throughout the year. One important guy that I want to mention was Giles Corey. So he refused to plead at trial after being accused, and in September of 1692 was killed by a form of torture which the subject was pressed beneath an increasingly heavy load of stones. So he ended up being killed by that. So when things started to turn around, October 29th, 1692, the new governor of New England had finally arrived, Governor Phipps, and he gave the order to dismiss the court of Oyer and Terminer after his wife had been accused. And after this, no more executions took place. However, all of those accused had remained in jail, had remained in custody. January of 1693, so a year after all this had started, this new Superior Court of Judicature convened in Salem, and charges were dismissed against all but 3. But after a warrant of execution was written for them, Governor Phipps issues pardons, which spared their life. In May, they held a variety of grand juries, and all were found not guilty, putting an end to the trials. So one thing I wanted to talk about, kind of to close everything up, is just looking back on these Salem witch trials and seeing how it affected the Constitution of the United States, how it affects the freedoms that we're lucky to have in the United States. So a couple things the Salem witch trials led to was legal representation. So here in America, we all have the right to legal representation in court. It also led to cross-examination of accusers. And then it also led to the presumption that one is innocent until proven guilty. One more thing that it kind of led to was separation of church and state. So again, the Salem witch trials were very influential to America. I guess one thing I wanted to ask you all is, after hearing all this, obviously we look back on it in America, it's a very embarrassing set of events that's happened in our history. But do you think that there's a possibility that there is some truth that there maybe was witchcraft in Salem?
Absolutely. Very small percentage, but was there, not only then, today, there's probably some witchcraft going on in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky.
Right.
I just think there was. Now, do I think it was responsible for a lot of deaths? And did these people need to be killed? No. Did this 4-year-old girl need to be thrown in prison? No.
And I think,
but was there a factual reason behind this? Probably somewhere.
I'll take it a step further. I think that if you looked really deep and really hard, that some of our very earliest apothecaries came from people who practice witchcraft.
Apothecaries meaning what?
Yeah, meaning the first people that use plants to treat people, to
Well, you
make
kind of talked
medicine.
about
Possibly.
last week or a couple weeks ago when you talked about voodoo, right?
Yeah.
They were healers.
I just feel like, and I agree 100%. I think that there probably was a chance it spun way out of control. It was humans and people. First of all, our country has a lot of blights. And if you look at our country as a person, it's gone through its trials and tribulations of getting older, getting better, getting more mature. Witchcraft, slavery. These are all huge negatives, black eyes on our way of
Country's
life in
history.
America. Yeah.
Sure.
But coming through them, overcoming them, those are things that make us better.
Yeah,
It allows for us to be more free. It allows for us to improve.
And it's probably not politically correct to say this, but in America's defense, at the time when it began, slavery existed in basically every country in the world.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you can't, if you're
And it wasn't just
100%
one
correct.
race.
We were wrong to do it. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to say that we were right in any way. I'm simply saying it was a worldwide problem. It was
Absolutely.
not an American
Right.
problem.
And unfortunately, it's still a problem in some countries.
Sure.
Well,
And it's a huge problem when it comes to our children, which,
Yep.
the African slaves that came to America were enslaved by Africans.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I mean,
They were enslaved,
sold,
other
enslaved and
Africans
sold
and
by.
slaves.
One thing we learned about voodoo is it originated by slaves that were sold in Haiti and Cuba and
Right.
the areas down there. Again, a worldwide problem.
But they come from Africa and were taken to
Sure,
Haiti. Yeah,
sure.
You probably said that. I just
Yeah.
misunderstood you, I'm sure.
So, but yes, I agree. I think that it was probably had something, or just hear me out for a second. As is the world today, you had Sally Joe over on the hill that lived in a house by herself, and that was so uncommon because she didn't have a man. So, grandma gets sick, it has to be Sally Joe's fault.
Right.
It
We've
has
always
to be
distrusted
Right.
those who are different in any way.
different or look different or sound different or talk different or dress different.
And it does seem like the initial women who were accused, they all had some sort of reason to be an outcast in the
Right.
society that they had.
And it's really, like you say, it's really sad. This whole episode, 200 people accused, 20, how many ever died?
Yeah, around 30, yeah.
But what did we grow from that? We grew a legal system that is unsurpassed in the rest of the world. The very foundings of that. Yeah. So that's why I kind of, I feel like it's part of our nation's growth spurts or growing pains.
Yeah.
But hey guys, I know did anyone want to add to that?
I'm good.
I just got some good news and I wanted to share it with you guys because y'all haven't heard it yet. And I want to share it with the world. First of all, how many people, now there is a reason for me to ask this question. There's a reason I asked this question. The question is, how many people in India do you think listen to podcasts every year?
I would
India?
have no idea.
India is one of the fastest growing
It's one of the most
countries.
densely populated
It's the
countries.
it is the densest
Yeah.
How about
populated
China?
country.
One of them just recently passed the other one. I thought it was
India
China.
just passed China.
Okay.
So out of all the Indians, by the end of this year, 172.8 million people are going to be listening to podcasts in India. Why is that important? Ask me, Brett. Say, Brett, Steve, why is that important?
Why is that important, Steve?
Because in India, and we don't do a lot of numbers or tooting our own horn here, but I've got to toot our own horn here. 172 million people. That's half of America's population is going to listen to podcasts in India. In the true crime section let me look. I'm sorry. I don't want to get this wrong, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah. Of that, in India, we have attained a rank of, we're under 10,000. That's our overall number.
Oh, wow.
However, in global reach, so the entire globe, 40 million plus podcasts. Okay? That's a lot. In the sector of true crime, globally, we are at 858. We are under 1,000 globally.
I think we all deserve our salaries to be doubled.
Hear, hear.
Cheers.
So I just wanted to bring those. We don't toot our own horn. We don't do a lot, but if you're under 1,000 in any category with 40 million podcasts, that's phenomenal.
There it is.
But guys, we're in the top 1,000 in 2 different categories. It's amazing. And I just, it blows
And you're doing
me away.
all of that despite me being on here.
Well, I think it's all Brett's
Who
fault.
would have thunk it?
You
Yeah,
hear that?
we'll do-
HelloFresh,
That's
Manscaped.
right.
Yeah, hello, Fresh. We're looking at you, kid. Hey, and 2 of us here actually actively use HelloFresh. I use it, and I know Jerry does. We both love the recipe. So, hello, Fresh. We're looking at you.
Very true.
Guys, appreciate the show. Brett,
Thanks
kudos
for
on
being
all the amazing info. That was,
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
An amazing job.
it was a very sad time. You know, how scary just to be an average citizen, not to be associated with the clergy.
Right.
Just to be somebody trying to make ends meet, and there you are. Oh, you're a witch. No, I'm not. Yes, they are.
And really, some of them, we know it happened due to absolutely nothing they did, but because someone
Just didn't like
didn't
them
like
or
something
had
about
a
the
different
art.
decision.
They were the single lady on the hill or whatever. It's different.
Insane. Now, this episode is November 1st, and I feel like we need to, we've done a lot of spooky stuff throughout Halloween. I can't wait to start going into some cryptid stuff and some more conspiracy theories, and just, I'm excited for this
Scary
upcoming
beings.
year. What?
And some scary beings.
Oh, beans. I thought you were saying beans. I'm like, I was like, what the hell's scary about beans?
Doing a show on jumping beans or whatever they're called.
Yep. Well,
Beings.
so anyway, if you listen to our podcast, like, share, post, tell your friends. We appreciate it. Our growth is there. I'm stoked by that.
Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, and you do that because of you. Jerry, how can they reach us if they want to chit chat? If they want some business cards, we'll be happy to mail you some at no cost. We want to just spread and grow and get better. So how can they reach out to us?
Our email address is newsworthy@gmail.com.
Awesome. Man, that episode is really interesting. And if you'll stick around for us for just a few commercials, we have another great story to tell you.
Hi, this is Ed Locke with USA Mortgage. When it comes to buying a home, the process can be overwhelming and confusing. With so many options, it can be hard to know where to start. That's why it's important to work with a certified mortgage loan originator. I have the knowledge and expertise to guide you through the process and find the best mortgage option for you. I will work with you every step of the way to ensure that you are getting the best deal possible. So if you're looking to purchase or refinance, please reach out to me at 502-680-0953. So don't take on the stress of buying a home alone. Work with me and I will make your dream a reality. Trust the professionals and make your home buying experience a positive one. MLS ID 448908, DAS Acquisition Company, LLC, doing business as USA Mortgage, MLS ID 227262. This is not a commitment to lend. Additional terms and conditions apply. USA Mortgage is equal housing opportunity.
If you want us to review or rate your product on air, if you have suggestions for new episodes, awesome ghost stories, or anything else, please reach out to us. Our email address is newsworthywithsteveandjerry@gmail.com. Our text number is area code 540-709-1318.
And now, back to the story. The Claudius Sanders Dinner House. Colonel Sanders may have sold out his fried chicken empire, even his name and his likeness in 1964. But he was no dummy. He had already been laying the groundwork for Sanders 2.0 by way of his wife, Claudia. Guys, just so you know, if you ever want to be the youngest person in the room, regardless of how old you are, go visit Claudia Sanders' dinner house. Unable to use his own name anymore, he quickly rolled out a new restaurant in Shelbyville, Kentucky, marketed under her name, and the Claudia Sanders Dinner House was born. And with all due respect to our friends at Yum Brands, the current marketers of KFC, the franchise is still doing a fantastic job. But it must be said that the chicken of today isn't necessarily the same formula it was way back in the 1950s. Claudia Sanders chicken still has that good old-fashioned taste with all 7 secret herbs and spices, and it's still finger-licking good. If you have the opportunity and the chance, stop by Shelbyville, Kentucky, and eat at the Claudia Sanders Dinner House. Yum, yum. And Jerry, if you can't see the light,
Be the light.